Hi everyone and welcome to Bible Bee Study Vlogs episode 1. If you're new here, I compete in the National Bible Bee Summer Study. In this video and for a few more videos over the summer, I'm going to be explaining how I study, and if that does interest you, you can check out the details at this website right here. So go check it out before registration closes on May 31st. And now let's get on with the video. So today in my first study vlog, I'm going to be talking about how I study the study passage. And obviously this year for the summer study, it's the book of James. I'm going to run through a few tips and just how I study it. The first thing that I would say is reading it every day. Now, if you think that's kind of too easy, in case you've already memorized it or something, we'll get to that in a minute. But in case you haven't memorized it or you just want to get familiar with it because the actual study doesn't start until June, then just read it every day and you will actually get more familiar with it than you might expect, especially if you are paying attention and not just reading it really fast. The next part about studying that I would talk about is memorizing the study passage. Some people might think that that's too hard or that they couldn't do that, but honestly, if you just do a couple verses every day, I think you could have it done before the test comes around and with a good amount of time to spare. So I would definitely suggest memorizing James if at all possible. Reading through it every day, at least for a couple weeks, and then starting to memorize it would work well because you will be more familiar with it already. And with that, if you have memorized the book, I would strongly suggest switching from reading it every day to quoting it every day, or quoting the parts that you've memorized and then reading the other parts. This way, you get more familiar with it, and instead of just reading it and not paying attention, you actually probably have to think if you're quoting it. Another super helpful thing to learn the study passage really well is random access. And if you don't know what that means, it's being able to hear a reference from James, like for example, James 1:1, and knowing what verse or what like the text is that goes with that reference, or the other way around. So hearing something that happens in James 1:12, hearing just those words and thinking, oh, that's James 1:12. And this is super helpful and it gives you a more complete understanding of the book. You know, oh, that's talked about in James 2:8 and also another verse in James 3 just from random access. Also, I've noticed that doing random access not only helps me know what the references are, but it has also helped with my memory, because it has helped me put the verses in order, so I know if I was getting stuck on a couple verses from my random access, not my memorizing, I know what the next verse is. Now obviously there's a lot more I could talk about in regards to studying James, but some of that will come out in how I study the discovery journal, how I study the cross references and the memory passages and other stuff. So I'm not going to talk about all that today, but I am going to leave with a few tips on how to actually study these things practically. So first, about reading the study passage, I already have it memorized, so I'm not currently doing that. But while I was doing it, what I learned quickly is that it does not take as long as you might think. James is a book on the shorter side, so you can probably get it done in like 15 minutes if you're focused reading. Another thing that's helpful is not only reading it, but listening to it at the same time. That way you're both hearing it and having to read it with your eyes. So that's really helpful. As far as the memorizing goes, I will be doing another video on that later in the summer probably, but I will say that my favorite way to memorize, and what is probably the most common way, is just repetition, reading a phrase, repeating it over and over in your mind, doing that to the next phrase, adding them together, and slowly, if you're consistent with it, you can get the whole book memorized. As far as quoting the study passage every day, I don't do this on some like weekends, like Saturdays and Sundays, I might not do that. But if I have the free time, or like if I'm just working on something that I just have to do with my hands and it's a mindless task, I can quote to the study passage and I know that I'm helping myself in the actual study because I'm getting more familiar with it. And I definitely don't normally quote it to someone else. It's normally just to myself. Sometimes it's even silently, and sometimes I'm just mouthing it, sometimes I'm actually saying it out loud, but I don't normally quote it to someone else. So if you were thinking, I don't have someone to listen to me every single day, that's fine, just quote it to yourself, or quote the parts you know to yourself. And lastly, about random access, you might be confused, how do I actually study that? Do I just have to pay super close attention when I'm reading the book, or is there an easier way? The way that I do is using Quizlet, and I have Quizlet sets under my username for ESV because that's the version I use, and you can check them out right here. That's my Quizlet username. And in every study season, including where I'm right now, like at the beginning, I just see the text of the actual verse, like the content, and whether I'm doing learn or write or flashcards, I then answer with the reference. And then as I get better at it and faster and learn it better, which I'm not to that point yet, I can later answer with the actual text. So I see the reference and I can either give you the gist or the full text of the verse. But at the beginning, that's pretty hard to do. So whether or not you're doing Bible Bee this year, maybe you just want to study a book of the Bible, or you are competing in Bible Bee, you can use these methods to learn any book better. You can read through it, you can memorize, you can quote it, you can learn the random access on it. That's a really cool thing to know, the random access on a chapter. Maybe you're just studying a certain chapter right now and you want to learn what the references and the texts are better. And that wraps this video up. I hope this was helpful to show you how I study. I'm super excited for this series. I'm going to be doing more videos, as I mentioned earlier. So if you are interested to see how I study this summer, don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.